and welcome to the Federal. The United States' decision to allow Ukraine to use long range missiles marks a pivotal moment in the ongoing war. To talk more on this, I have the Federal's managing editor K S Dakshina Murthy with me to answer five major questions that arise from this situation. Thank you for joining. And my first question is, why did Biden do it?
The Russia-Ukraine war, which has been going on since February of 2022, which means 2.5 years and close to 3 years now, has in a sense it's stagnated. In a sense, there's an impasse. And what has been happening is that Ukraine is slowly on the defensive. Though they made some advances, Russia has managed to push them back in the Kursk region. And the advantage is, as of now, with Russia. That's one thing. The other thing is that there are now reports of 11,000, at least around 11,000 North Korean soldiers who have come to the front. Russia is using their services to fight Ukraine. Now, the NATO allies and the US had warned Russia that they cannot have foreign troops coming and fighting on their behalf. And the other thing is, but at the same time, let's also remember that the US and NATO have been helping Ukraine with, advisors, military advisors on the ground. You have people in Kiev right now. You also have a massive military equipment that has been flowing in from the US and Ukraine. All this has been happening, but Russia is not expected to take any help from outside. But Russia is also facing a lot of squeeze in terms of the manpower. In fact, if you recall, a lot of Indians who went there on employment found themselves on the Ukraine border fighting the war, which they knew nothing about. And then, of course, with a lot of diplomatic pressure, many of them have been sent back. So, which basically means that there's a lot of pressure on Russia as well. So, the North Korea-Russia relationship is a very strong relationship, and North Korea was obliging Russia by sending in troops, and there now it's almost proven that they are on the ground fighting. So, this is one major reason why there has been a jump or a change in the existing situation. And Biden has probably done what he did because he had warned Putin not to use foreign soldiers.
So, what is the significance of this decision? What is the significance of Joe Biden's administration's decision to allow Ukraine to use long-range missiles against Russia?
What basically a long-range missile, the usage of a long-range missile is basically a game changer. Because as it stands now, despite the tanks and even helicopters, drone help, artillery equipment, etc., from the West and from, of course, the US, and these are really top of the line equipment, Russia has managed to push back Ukraine. The Ukraine has not made much of an advance. So the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, for the last few months has been putting a lot of pressure on the US, saying that, we need to use these long range missiles, and then he's been demanding and all that. But the US had said, no, don't use the long range missiles. That's one thing. And Russia had very categorically stated that if these long range missiles are used, it's going to take the war to another level. What it basically means is this long range missiles, if fired into Russia, can strike deep into Russian territory. It could probably even reach Moscow. It can, do all kinds of damage across Russia. Of course, Russia has the ability to counter these missiles. At the same time, it does take the war to a new level, and the war, in some ways, gets deeper into Russian territory. Okay, that is the significance of this long-range missiles thing. And Putin, being Putin, can react in any manner. He can, just say, fine, well, I don't want this, so let's have some negotiation and close it, which is not going to happen, which doesn't look like happening. Or Putin can react the way he's generally been reacting, just fighting, taking the fight to another day. The third possibility is that Putin can turn around and say that, well, you are using a long-range missile which you are not supposed to be, and which basically means NATO and US come directly into the war as far as he's concerned, which means that it leaves all the options open for Russia, which could include usage of nuclear weapons. So it can be anything can happen. So it's a very, very dangerous move of by the United States.
So, aren't the US and its NATO allies already helping Ukraine with weapons?
Exactly. So, in fact, Ukraine couldn't have sustained this war without the help of the US and NATO. And it was basically the US and the NATO which forced the issue in a sense that they completely supported Ukraine into joining NATO despite objections from Putin. Now, why was Putin objecting? Because according to Putin, it would bring NATO to the doorstep of Russia. And Russia is itself a rump of the former Soviet Union. And so there is a sense of threat which the Russian president and Russia felt in this move. So once this was forced, I mean, this NATO issue was forced on Putin, Putin reacted. Putin reacted by invading Ukraine. It was Putin did not expect Ukraine to continue this war for this long, and it would not have been possible. But it has been possible only with the help of support from Russia and I'm sorry, from the US and the NATO. Peace negotiations which were started were sabotaged actually by the Europeans, especially by Boris Johnson, who made a specific trip to Ukraine and convinced Zelensky not to go with the not to go through with this peace negotiations. So since then, it hasn't happened. So what I'm basically trying to say is that Ukraine has been completely supported by US and NATO, and this is taking one step forward and a major step forward.
You just spoke a bit about the peace negotiations. Can we please go a little bit more into it? What has happened to the peace negotiations that has been happening until now?
Yeah. So when Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24th, 2022, the immediate response was for some kind of a talks to happen, which did happen. There were several rounds of conversations, and it seemed like both Ukraine and Russia in particular, did not want to prolong this. It was never Putin never meant this to be a long drawn war. He just wanted to get into Ukraine, teach, show them who the boss is or who the more powerful nation is or whatever he wanted to do, and then move back. The idea was not to invade the whole of Ukraine. It was more to teach Ukraine, give a rap on the knuckle, as we say. So the peace negotiations were going on, and there was a movement. In fact, they almost came close to an agreement after the fifth or sixth round of talks. That was at this very crucial moment when when Ukraine was about to sign the deal. Like I told you earlier, the Western European allies and the US and Boris Johnson particularly he was reported to have spoken to Zelensky and convinced him not to go ahead with it, and as that would be politically not very good, and he also gave him a lot of confidence to Zelensky, and they also told Ukraine that there will be complete support of the West. And Zelensky took them for their word, and imagined that it would be a short haul, because the whole of he expected the entire European allies and the US to send in their even troops, probably send in their equipment and complete support. But that did not happen, because once the peace negotiations were called off, the US and European backed off. They did help, of course. They gave them slowly. They started giving them, all the equipment that we discussed earlier. Then they also supported them with military advice and all that. And it did work to some extent by stalling the Russian advance into Ukraine. But what it has not done, what the allies in the West hasn't been able to do, is to conclusively establish that Ukraine is more powerful than Russia. They have not been able to do that. So in the process, this peace negotiation is completely dead. It's in a coma stage. I mean, it can be revived at any point in time if the situation so demands. In fact, this long range, the decision to have this long range missile, supply long range missile, and to use it against Russia is also seen as a pressure tactic by the West to force Putin to negotiations and conclude a peace deal which should not be pro Russia, which should be pro Ukraine. You see, so all these layered issues are there as far as the peace negotiations are concerned. They are there, yet not there.
So I've come to my last question to you, and this is one of the most important question. How will Russia react to this development?
That's the $1 million, or sorry, million ruble question. If you can put it that way, because Putin, being Putin, is known and he has also shown that he can take a hard decision. So, what can Putin do now? Now that the long range missiles are to be used, what Putin will do is wait. He will not do anything right away. Because please remember that this decision has not been officially announced by the Biden administration. Reports have quoted US administration sources saying that this kind of an agreement has been reached and the US is now allowed Biden to use, the Biden has allowed Zelensky to use it. But it's officially not yet been confirmed. So what will happen now is Putin will wait and see what's going to happen. Now, if the long range missiles are actually used, then all options are out there for Putin, and Putin can simply react in a manner that can take this Ukraine-Russia war into another world war, almost like that, which people earlier thought that was impossible. Even I personally never thought that it could, blow up into a world war, of the kind that we have seen in the past. But this particular move can cause anything because we don't know how Putin is going to react. So if Putin expands the ur of the war, or expands the manner in which he's the in which Russia is fighting by using more countering it more decisively, more volatile, much more violent manner, including the use of, just imagine if a nuclear weapon is used against Russia, against Ukraine, you don't even know where it's all going to lead to. Already the world is in the throes of the economic crisis brought about by this Ukraine-Russia war. So really, I think we are really at a crossroads, and we should all hope that sense prevails and this war does not become a larger, one. We should really hope that doesn't happen.